Welcome to part 2 of lecture 4, where we'll be discussing basic structure of writing, as well as active versus passive voice and the writing process. Structure refers to the overall organization of your writing, the way you organize your thoughts in relation to one another. The most basic part of writing structure is the paragraph. I have an example paragraph right here that uses good paragraph structure. There is a topic sentence which introduces the overall argument for the paragraph or thought that I'm focusing on, followed by supporting sentences that expand upon that idea, support it, and provide examples. Finally, there's a concluding paragraph which reinforces the topic and lets you know that this thought is complete. Here we have an outline of that basic paragraph structure. You should generally aim to have between 3 and 7 supporting sentences. Any less than 3 and your paragraphs are going to be looking a little bit thin. It might seem like you're not completely explaining the ideas you're trying to present. And any more than 7 and you start to lose people's interest or understanding as they get bogged down in details. So if you have more than 7, consider breaking up your paragraphs based on the ideas that they represent into smaller components. Here is that original paragraph broken down a little bit so you can see the structure. It has a topic sentence at the top, a concluding sentence at the bottom, and 7 supporting sentences in between. That is 7, right? I think that's 7. No, I was mistaken. That was 8. So at this point, I would start to consider maybe breaking my paragraph down into 2 different paragraphs. One talking about the importance of structure and what good structure is. And then the second could be offering examples of what to do if you find yourself with too small or too large a paragraph. In most textbooks that you use, paragraphs will be organized into different sections that relate to the same theme, and all of these sections are then organized into a chapter. For example, in my medical law and professional ethics course, there's a chapter on federal statutes and how they affect healthcare. Then there is a section within that chapter about the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And then within that section, there are different paragraphs that talk about important aspects of that act. This basic form of structure, where you have an introduction and then a body and then a conclusion, is followed for all of these points on the hierarchy, whether it is an individual paragraph or a book. A book is the same thing as a paragraph, just expanded into many, many, many paragraphs. It's the same idea of you're presenting a concept, you're supporting that concept, and then you're reviewing that concept. So you can use this to break things down into an organizational structure that's both easy to read and easy to write. If you want to go about writing a book, you don't start by just opening up a blank notebook or Word document and immediately hammering away at what you might want to talk about. You break your idea down into different components and different subjects. Some large books will be broken down into different volumes, which are collections of chapters. Some textbooks refer to these as units as well. When writing emails, you should use the same exact format. You should use a subject that summarizes your topic in a couple words, and then in the body, greet the person you're emailing, and then write a topic sentence that gives that topic a complete thought or idea, that expands it so the person will understand what the point of your email is. Next, have some supporting sentences. That's what you wanted to talk about. And then finally, review what you just said. If you are asking for something specific, make sure you spell it out clearly here in your concluding sentence. And then finally, say goodbye. In a larger email or a longer email, you can follow that same structure, expanding it into multiple paragraphs. But when you send long emails like this, you should really be considering whether an email is the most appropriate way to be communicating this information. Perhaps it's something you should be talking to the person about. So regardless of the length of medium that you're writing, or the length of, whatever it is, I can't think of the proper word, you can follow the same exact format. So if you're starting to write a book, you would break it up into different chapters. You would decide what the central theme or argument of your book is, and then think of what you would need to prove in order to support that. Then in each chapter, you would see what that chapter is about, and then what do you break that down into? What specific components? And then once you've broken that chapter down, you need to support each of those ideas with paragraphs. And finally, each paragraph itself is going to have the same topic, sentence, and concluding sentence. Just as a section will have an introduction and conclusion, a chapter will have an introduction and conclusion, a book will have an introduction and conclusion. So regardless of the length of your writing, you should be using some form of this structure. In this course, you'll have a couple of writing assignments, and following this writing process will make it easier to both write the assignment and get a good grade on it. First is the planning phase, and this is when you read the topic and then you try and figure out how you want to address it. Using the first project as an example, if you wanted to write to your local paper about the condition of local roads, this would be the beginning of your plan. You would select your topic and figure out exactly what your argument is. Perhaps it is that we need more funding for local roads because they're in poor condition. Next, you would research and collect data about your subject. This would be finding out information perhaps about the road budget and trying to get concrete information about the condition of roads. And then next, you would be deciding on your structure. That's organizing what you're learning and arguing into a coherent, logical progression. I added a little arrow from structure back to research and collecting because oftentimes these two processes are intertwined and interrelated. When you're researching, you're figuring out about your subject and then you start to structure it. And as you structure it, you need to learn a little bit more. And as you learn a little bit more, you end up researching and collecting more. So these two can kind of feed into each other before you finally have a good outline and go into the writing phase. Next, you have the revise and review portion, followed by editing your work, and then testing and publishing. I honestly don't have a great example for what testing is, so I'm just going to leave that one out. But publishing would be, for example, in this course, turning in your assignment. Here's an example from a course I wrote on patient rights. I started with a plan, and my plan was to help the reader achieve certain objectives. I came up with very concrete objectives that I wanted the reader to be able to achieve, and this way I knew exactly what I needed to write about. This is where the planning phase starts to blur into the researching and collecting phase, and that starts to blur into the structure phase. You can see that my ideas follow a somewhat logical flow here. You define child abuse, and then you differentiate between different types. You can't really differentiate between different types if you haven't established a definition. This becomes very useful for helping figure out your overall structure. And then once you start to get an idea of your structure, you should begin an outline. And this is where the structure goes right back into that research and collecting process. Once I have the general structure, I start doing enough research in order to fill out my outline. You can see here I have general topics like defining who a caregiver is, what harm is, what a child is. And then I can go into more detail. And a lot of the times I'll expand on that detail in an outline. This helps keep things very organized, and you can even write your supporting sentences. So all of a sudden, your structure is right in front of you. You can see right here, what is child abuse is my topic sentence. That's not a topic sentence itself, but that's where my topic sentence will go. Then I define child abuse and I expand on it a bit. Then I'll restate the importance of defining child abuse, or give some clue to my reader that that thought is now complete, and I'll move on. Once you begin the actual writing process, everything falls into place very quickly. And you'll notice I have things broken down here into small choppy paragraphs. And that's because this course was specifically meant for mobile use, that is on the phone, where you've got a screen that is much smaller than a desktop or a computer. So the paragraphs tend to be a little bit smaller and flow a little bit different. In these, the sections start to take place of what the paragraphs were before, which makes it a little bit easier to scroll through on a phone and still get all the ideas. The last subject I wanted to discuss today is active versus passive voice. Active voice is using the basic structure of an English sentence, where we have the subject, the verb, and then the object. On the other hand, passive voice flips this around and puts the object first, followed by the verb, and then the subject. That may sound like a lot of jargon, so I'll use some examples. The first example I give is, I read the book. I am the subject, I'm what the sentence is about. Reading, or read, is the verb, and then the object is the book. So this follows a very simple logical flow. I read the book. If you were to make this a passive sentence, you would take the object, which is the book, and put it in the beginning, saying, the book was read by me. You can see that doesn't sound quite as strong as the active voice version, and that's why we try our best to write an active voice, and I strongly recommend that you do your best to write an active voice on your assignments. It makes your writing clearer, more concise, and easier to follow. There are some situations where passive voice is useful, and that's generally where you want to put the emphasis on the object. For example, if I were talking about someone being hit by a car, I may say, a car hit my friend, because there are many different things that can hit you, but a car is one of the more dramatic and impactful things that can hit you. Here we have some more examples of the difference between active voice and passive voice. Anna painted the house versus the house was painted by Anna. Allie posted the video online versus the video was posted online by Allie. You can see that passive voice tends to add a couple of words, but those couple of words added don't really add a lot to the meaning of the sentence. Here are two more examples that show both the different portions of the sentence and how they differ in active versus passive voice. On the left side, you have subject, action, and object, or subject, verb, and object. And on the right side, you have object, verb, and subject. Sally drove her car off the road versus the car was driven off the road by Sally. The first one there is a little bit more to the point, avoids unnecessary words, and is easier to understand. Just like the dog bit Timmy on the arm versus Timmy was bitten on the arm by the dog. The first has 7 words, the second has 9. They both communicate the same idea with no additional meaning, but one of them uses fewer words and is a little bit clearer, easier to understand, and more to the point. So trying to use active voice in your discussion posts, in your responses to discussion prompts, in any of your communication assignments, it'll go a long way to making your writing easier to understand and a little bit more powerful. If you have any questions about the writing process, about structure, about anything for your communications projects, or just writing in general, feel free to drop by my office hours, 2 p.m. on Thursdays. That's it for this lecture on healthcare communication. Thank you so much for watching.